Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Welcome. This is the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Your host, Joey, the Italian Stallion Murray, joined, as always, by Russ, the idea guy, Morgan. Russ, we both have big smiles on our face today. We're thankful. Are you thankful?
I am so thankful. This is Turkey Day week, and it's hard not to be thankful on a week like this, but especially when you've probably, like me, already had 3 different Turkey Day lunches or dinners and leftovers.
And you're probably in a coma right now, okay? That's what I do.
I know. It's shocking that you would be in a Turkey Day coma. Everybody's like, yes, Stallion, we know you love to eat.
Dude, this is like the day you train for, okay? This is like the Super Bowl of eating.
Is this whenever you were running up the stairs when we were in Philadelphia, you were training for Turkey Day?
Exactly. You gotta put in the work, man.
Okay. All right, real quickly, what's your favorite of Thanksgiving?
Gotta be sweet potato casserole, the nuts on top, and the melty marshmallow goodness that they put on there.
Oh, yeah.
Don't leave that off.
No, that's so good. My mother and my wife make a cornbread dressing that is to kill for. I mean, it's got the juices from the turkey. It's been soaking all night long, and then when they cook it, and you just throw in some like actual real cranberry sauce, not the junk they come out of the can and like the tube, you
tubular,
chop it up. Yeah, no, not the frisbee cranberries. I'm talking about like the real cranberries. Like that is something that I can do all week long.
All right, now, but we're not just thankful for food, right?
We're not.
We got a lot to be thankful for. Like many of you have listened to this show. It started out as just a conversation with our clients, right? And now we're hearing from people all over the country, all over the world.
Yeah, it's so cool. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so thankful for you. Yeah, we're almost at like 30 different countries across the world, and we're sitting here having conversations with you in your house right now. And I mean, to me, that is like unbelievable. I'm just humbled by the fact that you listen to us every single week, that you share this podcast with your friends, because we're hearing from them. They're telling us, oh yeah, this person told me to listen to it. We went over 25,000 downloads this year.
I mean, that's not bad for a couple of just country bumpkins down in Birmingham, right?
No,
it's pretty awesome.
It's really cool. And to have, the ability to have like these weekly calls and emails with you just because of what you've heard on this podcast, it's motivation. I mean, obviously, you and I love to talk. I'm sure nobody's shocked by that. But we get on here and continue to do it each and every week.
Well, and people are taking action. I mean, it would be different if we were just having a conversation every week and people were like, yeah, that was nice, Joey. That was nice, Russ. But so you're calling us and saying, how can I do this? That is so fantastic.
It really is. I'm just so thankful for you. And because of this week, I want to give you something. I want to, because we're thankful.
He's generous, guys.
Yeah. So this is important. So you're listening to this, and either you're listening to this on Wednesday or you're listening to this on Thanksgiving Day. If you're listening to this any point after, you've missed it. What I'm about to give away. I'm giving you 2 days to be able to take advantage of this. But we want you to either go on our Facebook post, which is on our Facebook page, Wealth Without Wall Street. You'll see, look up The Tax Train is Coming. That's the most recent post you'll probably see. And put a post, I want a ticket. Because if you're here anywhere near Birmingham, we're going to give you a ticket to the documentary, The Power of Zero, which is how to be in a 0% tax rate in retirement, which is important considering that through the documentary, it's going to show us why taxes are going to double on us in the future. And you can come and spend an evening with us learning and being around other people who are as interested in this stuff as you are.
Yeah, we rented out a movie theater November 29th to do a premiere exclusive showing just for those folks that we're inviting, okay? Our clients and those of you listening here that can make it. So make sure to go on our Facebook page, and post "I want a ticket" in the comments of the Tax Train is Coming post.
And by the way,
you'll be
you
entered
have
into
to
that.
do this by
First
Thanksgiving Day, because that's when the tickets are sold out a week in advance. Now, if you're one of those that are like, I don't do Facebook,
Or maybe you're not local,
yeah, then
right? You're not going to be in town.
you can also send us an email at info@wealthwithoutwallstreet. And as long as you get us, I want a ticket in one of those things. If you can't come, we will get you a copy of the DVD. We're ordering the DVDs. We're pre-ordering those, and we're going to give a copy away. Now, we're going to only do this for the first 5 people. So
Yeah. So be sure to do that. Now, we have to get into our interview because guess what? We've heard from you, and you've said we need to hear from people. What are they doing with this? How are they using these policies and using the 5 pillars of Wealth Without Wall Street to grow their wealth? So I'm so stoked that we brought Dr. James Smith, we call him Jimbo, on our show today. Russ, what do you have to say about that?
Well, yeah, it is fitting that this is Thanksgiving week and we would bring someone that we were very thankful for, someone that's been around with our company for a long, long time, someone who's a great steward, a great advocate for Wealth Without Wall Street, but someone who has used this system to enhance his family's future. I mean, he is making lasting impressions, and he's going to create a legacy that's going to reach his children's children. And he's going to talk about exactly how he's doing that on this podcast. So I don't want to wait any longer. I want to jump in with our interview with Jimbo Smith. If you've been listening to our podcast, you're like, man, I love what you guys are talking about. I want to build passive income through one of these 5 pillars that you're talking about. But how do I do it? Stallion, tell them. It is so easy.
It's so easy that we created the longest URL possible. So you may want to write this down. freecall.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. Go to freecall.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com and you can set up your call with one of us. We're excited to talk to you.
Welcome into the show, Jimbo. So glad to have you in here.
Glad to be here, Russ.
I tell you what, you just told us a story that I'm just baffled by. You literally were physically sick when you learned about infinite banking.
Yes.
I mean, who else can say
I wanted
that?
to throw up.
I mean, that is not the way that I normally hear people talking about what we teach every day, Russ. I mean, they're usually like excited. Man, I'm so glad I found this. And then I'm waiting to hear just anticipation. Jimbo, what was it like when you learned about infinite banking? You're like, I was physically sick. So you're going to have to explain
Well, that was my initial reaction. Okay. You want to hear the story?
Yeah, you got
Okay.
to let us know.
Okay. My wife and I went to dinner with some good friends one evening several years ago. I guess, Russ, I can't remember how many years ago it was. I've been doing this, but anyway, went to dinner, and just in the course of dinner, we the wife of our friend, she said, "Have you heard about infinite banking?" And I said, "No. Tell me more about it." So she went into that she had met Russ, and she had been reading this book that Nelson Nash had written, Becoming Your Own Banker. And she was telling me some of the premises and some of the ideas that went along with infinite banking. And so, hey, I was so intrigued. I mean, I go home and I order the book. I mean, I get online and order the book. So I get it in a couple of days, and I start reading it. And then I read through it, and then I read through it again. And as I'm reading it, I mean, I'm literally getting physically sick. And when I say physically sick, I mean I was just nauseous. But here's the reason, guy. I mean, I'm glad that I learned about infinite banking. But in the beginning, I started thinking about. I mean, I've been in practice for close to 30 years, dental practice. And I got to thinking about all the things that I had financed throughout my life, all the principal and interest that were going to other entities, and it made me sick. I mean, that's all I can say. And then, but it quickly got over that because, Russ prompted me to take action. So,
well, I will say this, and that is not too uncommon that when you figure out what's happening, you're like, oh, and you start doing the math. And that's And I hear that part a lot. The physically sick part is is one of those that is new. But it's interesting that so you're out at dinner with a friend. She starts sharing with you this concept because obviously being a very successful dentist, like you said, you've been in practice almost 30 years, right?
Right.
And clearly you've probably had some financial advisors and other people calling on you and working with you over the years, and there's lots of ideas they shared with you. But in all of that time, this idea had never really come to you.
Never heard of it.
It all had been focused on how to create return in the market, I assume, and not
What
in this
I
area?
was taught, okay, buy term insurance and invest the rest. And that's what I did. I mean, I was putting all the money, all my savings into a 401k. And here's the thing. I'd watched that 401k. I mean, I've been practicing it 36 years now. It was 6 years ago, I think, when I started this journey. I'd been putting all my money into the 401k, and literally, guys, I've been through 3 market crashes. I've been practicing since 1982. So I've seen my retirement savings get halved 3 times. I mean, think about that.
Isn't that what they call the proverbial 201k?
Yes, yes. But they would keep telling me and showing me how much return I was getting on my money, and yet I was looking at it and say, okay, I used to have this much, and now I got this much, and it's half of what I used to have.
By the way, for those that are listening, your hand was higher, and then it came lower when you said, I used to have this much, and now I have this much, right? Because they can't see your hand.
Right, I got you.
But they probably knew that anyway.
Well, that is a pretty common thing, though. It's very typical. And as you said, you experienced the really good part, right? Because the early 1980s through 1999, I mean, that's when, for most people listening, they don't necessarily know and understand why the stock market had that huge bull run. And it was in the introduction of 401ks, because I think it was 82 or 83 is when that really got that little subsection of the IRS code was enacted to where people could start putting in. They were intended for high executives to be able to defer these bonuses and not have to pay taxes on them. But then they got tweaked to where then everyone could start putting money into it. And so we had this huge run in the stock market. So you got to see that. But also, as you said, you had several downturns in there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And, I mean, and when I read Nelson Nash's book, it really put things in perspective in that really, I mean, I'm telling you, Wall Street is a casino. I mean, that's my view of it now. And I've taken every bit of my money out of the market. It's all in life insurance policies, every bit of it.
Well, and it's interesting because you've applied this at a high level. I mean, just some of the ways you were talking about before, you've done this not only on policies on yourself, you've done it on your wife, your kids, you've financed things. We're going to get to some of those stories in a minute, but obviously some people, we actually just did a podcast on this. You can't just get policies just on yourself at the level that you have. So you've had to kind of learn ways to spread that out.
Right. Exactly. And in fact, now, I mean, I've had a few health issues in that now it's difficult for me to get a life insurance policy on myself. So, I've bought them on everybody in my family, children, grandchildren, my wife. It's...
Which is interesting because going back to one of the statements you said earlier, you were taught early on, buy term insurance and invest the difference. So if we break that down, you just mentioned that you've had health issues that have really been preventing you from being able to buy these whole life policies on yourself, right? So now the coverage that you would want to have when you get to a point later on in life, you can't get anymore because you took that advice. Secondly, you are investing the difference. But one of the things that I heard, and I don't know if you picked up on this, Joey, but when Jimbo said that he had gotten physically sick, he was thinking about all of the money, the interest that he had paid throughout his life up to that point, and thought, wow, how much of that money could have been mine if I would have had a different plan? It's the opposite, though. He never was taught that. He was taught to buy term and invest the difference, focus on return, and not focus on the dollars the 90-something% of the dollars that was going away from us, and how much of that was costing us interest.
Well, I think reading Nelson Nash's book, one thing that really struck me was he talked about how money has to flow, and it flows from one entity to a next and to another. And when you think about it, having all that money, all the principal and interest flowing back to me, I mean, that just made sense.
It's powerful.
Yes.
That's a powerful flow when you think of the number of dollars that you didn't say this, but I was envisioning those dollars just stacking up
Oh, yeah.
over those 30 years of
You're making
practice.
me sick again.
Somebody get a trash can in here.
So what was one of those kind of aha moments? You're reading this book. I mean, by the way, I just commend you for taking action in the fact that you listened to someone talk about this, and then not only did you go home and spend $20 or $25 to buy this Becoming Your Own Banker book off the internet, then you read it, and you said you reread it. I mean, that's unusual, right? I mean, that's why you're sitting here and you're as successful as you are, is because you don't take the status quo. You're going to be successful because you're going to take action on things. But what was one of those aha moments when you're reading the book that you're like, I can do this?
Well, I just I looked at the amount of money that I was putting into a retirement plan that the money was locked up and I couldn't get to, and I think, well, why don't I take that money and put it into life insurance policies that I have access to the money immediately? Because I'm looking at X amount of dollars in a 401k plan that I can't touch. I think that was really the aha moment. I mean, because I'm just putting this away. And then the other thing I'm thinking, okay, when I retire, depending on what party's in power or whoever's president, what are the tax rates going to be? Are they going to be lower? Going to be higher? They always tell me I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket when I retire. Can I guarantee that?
Well,
I would say no.
Yeah, well, right now, so we're in 2018 recording this. Right now, we are literally in the lowest tax rates of our country's history. The top tax rate is at 37%. Now, it doesn't seem low because when you add up state tax here in Alabama and another 5%, you add up all the sales tax and every other usage tax, we're probably paying more than 50%.
Right.
But comparatively, going back to the early 80s, and I don't know if you remember this because when you first started out, you wasn't making near the money you're making today. But do you know what the tax rate was, Dr. Smith, in 1980, 1981?
I can't remember.
Top tax rate was 70%. 70. So we're almost half of that today.
Right.
And people are like, oh, well, but that was 1980. I mean, people were probably making millions of dollars to have to be that. Do you know you only had to make $200,000 a year to be in that 70% bracket? And just what you said is, had you retired over the last 5 years or so, you would probably be in a lower bracket than where you were when you first started putting dollars in. Unfortunately, we're in a scenario where rates are going to be forced to go up.
Tax rates you're talking about.
Tax rates.
Yeah.
And I think, we just we have an event coming up at the end of the month, and we're been kind of previewing it. And one of the former Comptroller Generals of the United States, David Walker, alluded to the fact that tax rates must double in the future because of one 4-letter word, and that was math. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I do think there may be some people that are experiencing potentially less amounts of taxes today, but that rate's going to be significantly higher, I think, in the future.
Right.
I got a question for you. So prior to learning infinite banking, reading the book, what had been like your outlook or your goals as it relates to your financial picture? I mean, I know the strategy was, buy term, invest the difference. What did you think the outcome was going to be? Like, what were you headed towards?
Well, my goal was to pay off debt, become debt free, and then secondly, to put as much money into a retirement plan where I could just draw it out, quit work at some point and just draw that out and still live at the same level or same lifestyle that I'd been living. That was my goal. But every time the market crashed, those goals looked less and less attainable.
Had you done any math on what it was going to take, how much you could take out of those accounts, or how much you were going to have in those accounts? Like, had somebody sat down with you and done that, or were you using calculators to do that on your own?
I think really, Russ, I didn't. I guess my drive was, okay, fund it fully every year, and it'll work out.
Keep your head down.
That was my attitude, I suppose, because I was busy working and raising a family and kids and coaching Little League and all that kind of stuff. So, who had time to do all that? I'm just, keeping my head down, working and socking it away.
Yeah, doing what you thought was the right thing, right? You're following the advice of the pundits out there that says this is the method to financial success.
Right.
So obviously you started to question a little bit after these market corrections and stuff like that. But then obviously reading the book prompted you to think even a little bit more differently than that, more contrary to that. So what were those things that you were thinking after reading that?
Well, I mean, when the market crashed, the 3 market crashes that I went through, I didn't know there was anything else to do.
Right. No other options.
No other options. And so when I read that book, read Nelson Nash's book, then, I realized there is another option. And in my mind, it just clicked. I could understand how this was a much better option than what I'd been doing. In other words, I'm a dentist, and so I make my money little by little. To put it simply, I see a patient, do a procedure, you get paid for it. All those little procedures add up to what pays for my lifestyle, our living, pays for my house, pays for our cars, that sort of thing. So I'm used to incremental income. And I would say that, when I looked at, instead of trying to invest and maybe have a big year or this stock goes way up or whatever, we're looking at incremental, 4% compounding interest day in and day out. I understood that. And that made me feel more secure, and it also made a lot more sense. And I'm not going to be seeing, okay, now I've got X amount of dollars. Oh, now I've got only half of that. That's what really, I think that's what resonated with me.
So there's
kind of the tortoise and the hare thing almost.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I'm a tortoise.
How would you say, though, like in the past, obviously you're the 401k, how much hands-on management and access and control of where you were putting your dollars did you have compared to some of the interesting things, which I really want to get into, the things that you've been doing of late? How would you compare the two?
Well, I really didn't. I didn't really have control, but I did have a person who invested the money, and he didn't. It wasn't like he got commissions off the sales of certain stocks or anything like that. Basically, he was paid on the performance of the portfolio. So he had an incentive to make it get bigger, because the bigger their portfolio, the more he was paid. So, and I really think he did a good job as far as you could do investing in Wall Street. We were invested in some things that were real conservative, some were not so conservative, but it was basically, I think, a pretty tried and true mechanism that he followed, or method that he followed. So I don't really have any. I think he did as well as he could do. I don't blame him for anything.
Well, I don't mean in that, but I mean in the control aspect, because, kind of going into what you've shared with us, which I would love for you to kind of share on here, is some of the things that you've done with the money since you've kind of pulled it underneath this becoming your own banker wing, as a comparison to when you were really, again, he may have been doing the best job he could, but how much of the control did you have then versus kind of what you have now?
I had no control of the money, if you want to. No control of the money that was in the 401k, because I couldn't touch it.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into?
Well, yeah, more like the investment part. So, for instance, just an example, you mentioned how you've done some investing within your business,
Right.
and you've bought some equipment, and used this policy as an example. Obviously, that is something that you've been able to do to produce return. Comparing that to before, how would you say? Just kind of explain the differences in control there.
Well, here's the thing. In the past, when I would say buy new equipment or make improvements in my office, I would borrow from outside sources, and and depending on, early on, I still had to do that, but as my policies built up in cash value, I was able to buy new equipment for my office, and then I would finance it, and the practice would pay me interest. And so, this is kind of funny, but you know how when a bill comes in and you got to pay it, you kind of grudgingly pay it. But like now, if I'm paying myself, I'm kind of excited. Because
It's payday.
like Nelson Nash was talking about, money's got to flow from one source to another. Why not have it flow back to me instead of to Wells Fargo or Regions Bank or whoever's financing your latest venture? We've actually done some things. My son had an opportunity to buy a business several years ago, and we were able to finance the purchase of that business and actually helped him actually expand it
That's
after a year or
huge.
two.
How did you do that? Give specifics if you don't mind. Like for someone who maybe not understands what you're talking about, what exactly did you do there?
Well, here's what we did. He found a business that he thought he would enjoy doing, and it looked like a pretty good investment. So we negotiated a price, and then instead of going to the bank and borrowing X amount of dollars, we went to his insurance policies, which I have insurance policies on this son. And so we went to his specific insurance policies, borrowed the money out of that. I gave the money to my son, he bought the business, and then he signed a note to pay the money back to me. And so he makes a monthly payment back to me, and then I make a monthly payment back into my insurance policies.
Now, Jimbo, this is your kid here. So you going to make him sign something? Like that he has to actually pay you back?
Of course.
That just doesn't seem right.
Well, when I graduated from dental school, I went to a banker with my hat in hand, and he made me sign something.
He sure did, didn't he?
He made me sign something to make sure that I would pay that money back.
How has the payments of your son paying you back, have you had huge fluctuations in those on a monthly basis, or have those been pretty steady?
No, they've been pretty steady, but what I mean is if he's paying the money back to me, or if I take a loan from an insurance policy for some reason, if you have a down month, then if you don't make the payment, the bank's not going to come repossess your equipment or repossess your business. You've got some leeway there where, okay, we can let it slide this month, but then the next month, we're going to make sure we make the payment. So it gives you a little peace of mind in that you're not on such a rigid schedule, even though you should adhere to that as best you can. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've shared on the podcast plenty of times of loans that we've done in our families, and that is definitely, we've experienced both of those. We've experienced where there's been times for differing reasons where we needed to suspend a payment, if you will, and add it on the back end. But absolutely, the benefit we have of lending money internally is that we get to make the rules,
right?
Whatever those rules are, right?
Right.
And by the way, you need to have rules. You got to have house rules. I'm sure whenever the kids were at the house, you had some house rules,
right? Exactly.
You got to have rules as you lend money. Specifically, when you're thinking of ways to use your policies now, what are the thoughts? What are the things that that's rolling through your minds that maybe somebody who's out there right now thinking about, well, I've never bought an insurance policy. I've never even thought about how is it going to use it. Like, talk about just what's going on in your mind and how you use these policies now versus whenever you first got them, maybe.
Well, I think when I look when we first started, I think I was thinking more in the terms, okay, if I buy a vehicle, I'm going to finance it instead of borrowing the money through a finance company. Or if I'm going to make a large purchase, say of a business, just like with my son, or equipment for my office. I kind of looked at it like that. Well, now I don't just look at it like that. For instance, like my daughter got married. Okay, big, and I know you guys all have daughters.
Just a
Forget
couple.
about college, save for weddings.
Yes.
Okay? Save for weddings. So, just like when she was married, she got married this past April, then, I didn't have enough cash on hand to pay for the wedding. And really, if I did, I don't think I would have done it anyway. So we borrowed the money out of one of her policies, specifically, and paid for most of the wedding expenses. And then we're paying that back on a monthly basis. And I don't know, it just makes a lot of sense in that, I've got the money in the policies to use. I don't need to borrow it from an outside source. And I really don't want to expend all my cash on hand to finance things like that. To me, it just makes a lot of sense. And I think talking to people like Dick Dykeman in Scottsdale, Dick thinks you ought to be financing everything you own, even if you've already paid for it. Finance everything. So haven't gotten to that point yet, but I get his point. I get his drift.
Let me ask you this. Sometimes the idea of family banking is a real advanced idea. It's like one of the things that people don't catch on to maybe ever. And it seems like you've really taken that on very quickly. Like something kind of clicked. What was it for you that you started seeing the opportunity within the family to utilize your system, basically?
Well, I think that all of us would like to pass on wealth to our children, okay? And I see this as a generational thing. And, Russ has taught me a good deal about that. And I really, it makes a lot of sense to me. When I think about it, all these policies that I have I've got policies on children. I've got policies on grandchildren. I have policies on even one of my employees. But what I see with the family is that one day these policies will all be in their possession. And for instance, like I have a 4-year-old granddaughter who's got $20-something thousand in cash value in her insurance policy. She's 4. Okay, I have 2 other male grandchildren who've got more than $4,000 in their, close to $5,000 in their insurance policy. We bought them when they're a month old. So when you think about
That's
what
powerful.
that's going to be when they get to be my age, I'm 60, nearly 65. What their cash value, what their death benefit will be. For instance, like my wife and I. Well, really my wife, because I don't have any whole life policies on myself. Her death benefit is going to pass to the next generation. And they're going to be able to take that money and hopefully invest it in other policies. And we have a meeting. They're learning. We had a meeting. We try to have a meeting with them once a year. We had a meeting at the beach this 4th of July where I gave them a sheet of paper that showed their policies and what the death benefit was, what the cash value was, and how that's growing. And, they just kind of, it was like a light bulb went off. They all just kind of, wow, look at this.
That's a huge legacy that you're building.
And Russ, I think we're 6 years into this now, maybe 7, I don't know, close to 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's only going to get better.
I find that interesting that how many times before you started doing this did you guys sit down at the beach and talk about the wealth of the family?
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
Mm.
I've got my little retirement fund. I've got my business. We just didn't talk about that. But this, to me, this I can see how this could really start something really big. generational wealth passed down from
Yeah.
one generation to the next. Now, you got to get the kids to cooperate, and they've got to be educated. And I think that, I probably need to do a better job with that, but at least we've got them engaged and they understand it. In fact, I think my daughter that just got married, I think she understands it better than the rest of them, because she's already talking about how her and her husband are ready to start doing this.
Well, I think just so I don't miss this, as you just mentioned, there's nothing magical about the policies that has brought everybody together, but there is something very powerful about not everybody seeing themselves as a silo. We've talked about that before on the family banking episode, that historically traditional finance silos everybody off.
Yes.
This is my 401k, this is my IRA, this is my so on and so forth. But when you're tying it all together and saying, man, my son has this business opportunity, it's an investment that's close to me. I want to take advantage of that and help him at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That brings the family together and draws them in.
Well, and here's the thing that I heard from what you were saying, Jimbo, there is, and the common theme is when you ask people about where did you learn about money, the most common answer is from my parents. But when you really ask them, what did they teach you? And you're like, well, not a lot. I sort of observed their spending habits, or I observed the way that they saved or invested money. And that's the reason why the financial literacy of our country is so small.
So poor.
It's because there really is not a whole lot of teaching going on. But I know you kind of said, well, I need to do a better job. By the way, we all do. But the fact that you guys are meeting once a year and you're sharing this information, now you're actually creating an education. So that's something when their children, which by the way, they're probably sitting close to these meetings. I know they're still really small, so they don't know what's going on, but they're observing too. And they say, oh, well, this is natural. Families get together and they talk about money. They talk about business opportunities and how they can use this together. They talk about what's going to happen generationally with money. You're stirring up interest in that. That's teaching. That's the thing that's lacking in the typical financial advice out there, is as what you said there, Joey, is that it's very siloed, where this is meant to be abundant.
That's right.
It's meant to create conversation and spark thought process.
Well, I've said this many, many times, that you will not be able to outspend that policy. You have to leave a legacy, right? There's no way you're going to outspend those policies at your generation that's going to go to the next generation, which is immediately going to have a responsibility.
Right.
And now you're teaching them what to do with that responsibility, which is so powerful.
Well,
I love that.
I think the way they're going to learn the best is that they all know, just like my son and daughter know, we borrowed money to buy their nursery furniture. And Morgan knows we borrowed money to buy his business, okay? So I think as they use it, and we've encouraged them, we say, look, you get ready to buy a vehicle, or you get ready to make a large purchase, or you need a washing machine and dryer or whatever, then borrow it from your own policies out of the Smith Bank, okay? And I think that's really how they're going to learn,
Oh, yeah.
And and other things, like I know. I get back to my son that has the business. He has a big insurance, liability insurance, and coverage on the gym and all that. When that comes up, we financed that a couple of times. Where it's a big, say $3,000-$4,000 payment. He'll borrow the money and then pay it back to his own policy.
Right, to help him with cash flow, because it's always tough for small businesses to come up with large chunks. And that's we see that all the time, where having access to a big chunk of cash can help with cash flow throughout that. So for people, Jimbo, that are listening to this, that may be sitting on the fence to this whole infinite banking concept, buying whole life insurance policies or doing family banking, wherever they are, because some of them may have policies, but they're scared about this. What are some words of wisdom, advice, just based upon your experience, that you'd share?
I would say that I wish I had started this about 30 years ago. I mean, that's my only regret. You know, I look at it now, I think, where would I be if I had started this, if I had known this 30 years ago? Now, my children and their children hopefully will not do that. In other words, they'll have been taught and will have learned how they can leverage this and keep the Smith Infinite Bank going. That's what I would say. In other words, like Nelson Nash says, when's the best time to buy a policy? Now.
Yeah.
You know, don't wait. So I would say, do your homework. You know, I'd get Nelson's book. There's other books out there I'm sure that Russ and Joey can recommend. But I would say do your own study, and I think you'll come to the same conclusion. I mean, you know, when I found out about this, I couldn't wait to get started.
All right, so I'm going to jump in with one final question. I know we're trying to wrap up, but for those folks that are listening, and we hear this a lot as potential reasons why people don't start. They say, "Am I too old to get started?" And it sounds like you learned about this late 50s, early 60s
late 50s
time frame. And we talk about Nelson didn't really even come to grips with this until he's 49. We're not talking about a ton of time difference there, but people think, oh, it's just too late. How would you respond to that?
Oh, I would say it's never too late. And, you know, I think, you know, by preserving your capital and adding to it little by little with compounding interest is way better than watching your investment get halved. Because, you know, there's another one coming. You can bet your bottom dollar. There's another Wall Street crash coming. You know, it's great right now. And people are making a lot of money, but, you know, I can just tell you that I've been around long enough that it's coming. You just don't know when. And if you knew when, then you could probably keep doing it because you could get out at the right time.
Yeah. The problem with that, though, is you got to guess right twice. You know, there's some people that are getting out when the market's up, but you got to guess right when to get back in, right? And that doesn't happen. We do the math on the lows to the lows and the highs to the highs, and they're just not that great. Well, Dr. Smith, we really appreciate you coming in and sharing this. I know for you listening to this, there's probably been a few nuggets in here that you probably have kind of maybe asked yourself. And, you know, as Joey and I always say, this is something that can't be taught. It has to be caught. And I would take Dr. Smith's advice. Pick up a copy of Becoming Your Own Banker. We'll put a copy in the show notes that you can get a link to go purchase that if that's something you haven't done, or if you just want to have a 15-minute conversation with Joey or I and ask how that this might apply to your situation. You know, maybe you're not as young as Dr. Smith, and you're still questioning, is this old? Are you too old for this? Or maybe you're in your prime of your life. You're 41 like I am. Because see, you said 30 years ago, and I'm thinking, well, I was 11, and I can assure you, I wasn't thinking about life insurance then. But these are things that we'd love to have a conversation with, and we thank you so much for listening, and look forward to talking to you the next time.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.